Excellent. Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to members, officers, press and public joining the Strategic Development Committee tonight. The meeting's being live streamed on YouTube, so welcome to everyone watching on YouTube as well. Some of our officers are also joining this evening's meeting via Zoom. Can everyone present hear me? Excellent. So my name's Susan Masters and I'm the Deputy Chair of the Strategic Development Committee and will be chairing this evening's meeting as our Chair, Councillor Tripp, is unwell and we all wish her a speedy recovery. For the members in the room, when you're speaking, can you please speak clearly and loudly so that the microphone can pick up what you're saying? For those joining by Zoom, please mute your microphones if you're not speaking. I'll now ask the members of the committee and officers to introduce themselves.
Councillor Blossom Young, Beckton.
Councillor Havan-Verde, Bowling Ward.
And do we have any members online at the moment? Okay. Officers, would you like to introduce yourself? Jane?
I'm Jane Custance. I'm the Director of Planning and Development, handing over to James.
Hello, I'm James Bolt, Senior Development Manager. Hand over to Liam.
Liam McFadden, Principal Planner, and I'll hand over to Greg.
Hello, I'm Greg Gray, Principal Planner.
Do you want to throw to Vincent?
And Vincent Healy, Legal Advisor.
And anyone else online want to introduce yourselves? Excellent. And
I'm Shirley Fortune, I'm clerk for the meeting.
Fantastic. So I'd like to remind members that when a vote is taken, it will be taken by way of raising your hand in order that we can capture this on screen. So in terms of apologies for tonight's meeting, I have apologies from the Chair, Rachel Tripp, from Councillors Miraj Patel, Alan Griffiths and Madeline Sarley Pontin will be joining online. So unfortunately, although her attendance will be noted, she will not be able to vote. And I'm not aware of any other apologies.
No, Chair.
Item number 2 is minutes. So we have the minutes of the meetings held on the 21st of January and the 4th of February 2025 for approval, which are outlined on pages 15 to 30 in your agendas. Is everybody happy? Is there any changes anyone wants to make? So in that case, can I have an agreement that the minutes are a correct record, seconded by Councillor Verdi? Next item is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest for any of the items on tonight's agenda? Item 4, determining planning applications. Members are asked to note the advice from the Head of Legal Services on determining planning applications. Is that noted?
Good, Chair.
Thank you. So announcements from the Chair, item 5, request to address the committee. The committee has received the following requests to address the committee. Would the speakers please identify themselves when I call out their names? In terms of item 6, land at the former paint factory and Central Thameside West, North Woolwich Road, Silvertown, London, E6. Gwyn Stubbings?
Yes, that's me.
Chris Gascoigne? And Nick Simpson. Excellent, welcome. For item 7, I have James Stiles and Alistair Buckle. And then there's a whole team beneath that. And then item 8, land at 68 to 70 High Street, Stratford, London E15. Bradley Carter, Carl Van, Sean Tickle, Mark Cass, and Lizzie Marchant.
Yeah, online.
Oh, right, fantastic. Sorry, Lizzie.
No worries.
And then responding to questions, I've got down as, just make a note, those two are online. Oliver Beer, online. Matt Pepper from Space Hub, line. Oh, right, okay, welcome. Jack Summerhays, okay. Ben Whitehead,
Online.
okay. And Tassia De Paula Yamo Mardi, and apologies for the utter mispronunciation. Sorry?
Maybe online, Chairman.
Okay. And then I have no speakers registered for item 9. So the usual practice is to allow up to 5 minutes in total for both supporters and objectors. Is that agreed?
Agreed, Chair.
Can we agree the remainder of the order of business as outlined in the agenda? And is anyone here needing to sort of break the fast for Ramadan? No, okay. Although I probably will have a comfort break at some stage in the agenda. So would members please note the officer update report circulated? Please note the full consideration and planning assessment of matters is covered comprehensively in the committee report. Trust members have had full regard to the committee report, and the officer presentation will be a summary of the key issues only. So into the meeting proper. Can I call on the applicants team for item 6 to address the committee? And just to repeat, you have 5 minutes.
Chair, I've got the presentation. If you just give me a moment, I'll. Okay.
Great.
Yeah,
Okay, ready?
great.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, Chair. Good evening, members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name's Gwyn Stubbings from the applicant GLP, and I've got some of the project team here with me this evening. We are here to seek your approval for our reserve matters application for what we refer to as our multifunction building, or MFB for short. The MFB forms part of our wider data centre campus that is currently under construction at North Woolwich Road, adjacent to West Silvertown DLR station. Members may recall approving our hybrid planning application for the data centre campus at committee in June last year. Also, hopefully be aware of the importance the government, the GLA, Newham Council are placing on data centres and their importance to the national and local economy. I had the pleasure yesterday of attending an online discussion to discuss AI, data, innovation, inward investment in the borough, also attended by the Mayor. Slide 2, please. Right, there we go. So yes, just as a brief reminder, so the hybrid planning application is for 3 data centre buildings, as shown on the left of the screen. Everything in white was granted in detail, and the areas shaded yellow were in outline only. So we had an outline permission for the MFB building, which is zone 4 on the plan, and then a close-up of that on the right-hand side. The primary purpose of the MFB is to provide for a range of local employment, training and community uses, as well as activating the site frontage as part of the wider public realm offer. We can see that on the frontage there. If we move to slide 3, please. So this is some images of the data centre buildings themselves. The image on the left is what was granted in detail, and the images on the right are CGIs of the future buildings 2 and 3. We are sort of progressing the delivery of the site. The first data centre building is under construction, and this is a CGI image of the MFB in the middle of the screen. With the CGI of the second data centre building sitting behind it. So yes, we're on site. We're making good progress. And looking forward to bringing forward our reserve matters for the second and third data centre buildings in the coming months. Well, the applications have been submitted and then hopefully they'll be referred to committee in the coming months. Slide 4, please. So here's some CGI images of the building itself. We're seeking reserve matters approval for. So it's, as I say, the principle of the building has been approved. So this application relates to the layout, scale, appearance and the landscaping. And the position and location of the building has also been approved under the hybrid consent. So really just like to take the opportunity to thank your officers, particularly Greg, Gray and Ben Hull, and the design review panel for their inputs and, you know, very extensive and collaborative process that we've been through to bring this application forward. Slide 5, please. Here's just some images showing the sort of internals of the building. We very much sort of prepared this proposal to maintain as much flexibility as possible.
You have 1 more minute.
Okay, yeah. So it can accommodate a sort of range of different uses in different arrangements and has the capacity to accommodate up to 200 people when in full use. Slide 6, please. And there's just a summary of some of the local benefits that will come forward with this particular part of our project and our overall data center campus. So, as I say, providing a hub for skills, training, education for local residents, community groups, schools. We also have an obligation within our Section 106 agreement to make 50% of the space rent-free. So yeah, and I think that's it really. I think that's probably brings us to the end. So yeah, happy to answer any questions that you may have. So thank you.
Fantastic. And I'm not aware that we have any objectors on this particular application. So in that case, officers, would you like to make your presentation?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen. Hopefully it'll come up. No, it says I'm being disabled from participating. Can you clear that for me, please?
If you try it now, Greg.
Thank you. Hopefully you can all see that.
Yes.
What I will do, Chair, is I will, since the applicant has concentrated and given you all the details of the scheme itself, I'll concentrate on the key planning considerations for the application, taking you first to the fact that there was an extensive community consultation, 5,621 letters sent out, including site notices as well. Only one response to that, which were a number of questions which I've summarised on the sheet there. They were really just matters of detail that the respondent wanted to answer questions on, and I have done that for her, and I've had no further feedback. And then turning to the key point, Chair, and as you said at the beginning, it's important to bear in mind in considering the Reserve Matters application that the planning considerations are prescribed by regulations as to what the matters might properly have regard. And I've listed the 5 ones there: scale, appearance, layout, access and landscaping. And I'll come to those very briefly. I would also ask committee to note that the Reserve Matters application is accompanied by a statement of conformity of the development with the hybrid permission environmental statement, and no conflict is found. So turning briefly, therefore, Chair, to the Reserve Matters themselves, dealing first with scale. The size, siting and scale of the building accords with the parameters plan that was agreed as part of the approved hybrid permission. No heritage assets are affected. I list there some information regarding job creation, 15 full-time equivalent jobs in managing the multifunction building once it's up and running, and 155 jobs over the construction period. And in case there are any questions with regard to the early delivery of the multifunction building, as Gwyn Stubbins said, this is part of the Section 106 obligation that the building be built and ready for occupation prior to first occupation of the first data centre hall. That's why it's with you now. The appearance of the development is the next consideration. It's considered to be high quality and has been supported both by the DRP and in extensive consultations with officers, including our strategic design officer. The multifunction building is front facing and open to the North Woolwich Road frontage, and as has been explained to you, a wide range of meeting room space available, from small rooms of no more than 13 square metres up to 143 square metres, with capacity for large and small attendees. Kitchen space is entirely ancillary. There is no open retail element within the site, and all use it would be by way of prior notification and booking through the applicant, who will maintain the maintenance of the building and will care for it both in terms of its upkeep and from a security point of view as well. Importantly, the multifunction building also stores the district heating network hub from the data centre development for all data centre halls, and will be the output point for heated water through the district heating network. So that will comprise a good quantum of space. Access, it's a car-free development save for DDA spaces, cycle parking, and direct pedestrian and cycle access to the frontage, including, of course, from West Silvertown Station. And then within terms of landscaping, the multifunction building sitting within a wide landscape public realm, of which it's an integral part. And as a consequence from that, officers recommend to committee that you agree the reasons for approval and grant the reserved matters application in accordance with the informative and condition listed in the report before you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. So before I throw to the committee, I mean, this all sounds very good. I think the only thing that leapt out at me reading my papers was on page 61, concerns about the size of the energy centre. Is that a valid concern to this particular building, and has that been addressed?
Well, it is of the appropriate size, Chair. It's a key component of the design because the building is part of the hub. So the applicant has provided detailed information to explain why that amount of space is required, because it should not be forgotten, as I say, the hub will provide for the whole of the development, all three of the data halls comprised in the scheme. So it's and it requires no more than space than is absolutely necessary.
And I mean, my other questions, it sort of talks about the building being fully fitted out. So I was just wondering what level it will be fitted out to in terms of sort of community uses. What will be in there when our residents or other organisations want to book in?
Yeah, so
we'll probably answer that for you, Chair. Sorry, Quinn.
Thanks, Greg. So we have an obligation to not only construct the building, but to fit it out prior to the first occupation of the data hall. It's a little bit of a balancing act in terms of not being, not fitting things to the walls as such, because we want to ensure that the space maintains flexibility in terms of the users. So it'll be a sort of what's the architectural term in terms of the fit out? It'd be, obviously all of there's some kitchen amenities and everything like that. That'll all be provided on day one. But like I say, what we don't want to do is sort of commit to, for example, theatre style seating within one room so that we can maintain the flexibility. So we've got an obligation to enter into and agree a management plan. So should planning permission be granted this evening, we've got quite a lot of time in front of us to work with community groups to understand a bit better in terms of how people would like to use it, who those potential users are, and then we can work together in terms of what that fit out will look like at the end of the day. But in terms of carpets, everything like that, that's all kitchens, all into the building on day one.
And there'll also be digital connectivity as well, so the rooms will, because that's for education, catering for, so kind of be wired to connect. And then once we know what's needed by and how things are going to go forward, we will kind of provide that connectivity and liven up the building so that it can be used as it's agreed to be used when the management plan's sorted out.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, we've got an obligation under the 106 to actually submit those details to the council in terms of the approach to management and also the engagement strategy with community groups, with your regeneration team and others. So before we occupy it, you'll have full sight of that under the 106. And
in terms of the length of stay, is this being thought of more as outside of the education role, more of a kind of exhibition space, or are you allowing for tenants who might want to be there for quite a long period of time?
Potentially, I think the focus is very much on sort of training skills, hosting events in the building itself. So having said that, there's scope for startup businesses to occupy space within the building, which, particularly if there's synergies with data and AI and that infrastructure. So potentially you could have some small startup companies that take a room and stay there for many months, and as they expand and grow and become established, perhaps move on. So, in terms of that kind of incubator type space. So lots of opportunities, lots of flexibility. So potentially some people being there for weeks or months, and then others maybe using it more on a ad hoc basis of, a few hours. What we'll have to do as part of the management plan is have a sort of booking system as well, so people can see what space is available at what time when they want to use it.
Okay, and I'd like to welcome Councillor Beckles to the meeting. Unfortunately, you won't be able to participate in this item as you missed the beginning, but welcome. Councillor Young.
Yes, I think I had questions along Councillor Masters' line really, and just that, I guess if you can talk us through that timeframe of when that is likely to come, but also, are you in discussions with training providers or with management operators at this point? Because it's really difficult to design if you don't have a sense of who your end user is.
Yeah, no, happy to take that question, Councillor. So in terms of kind of timeline, so where we are at the moment, we're on site looking to deliver our first data center building. That will take quite some time. It'll probably take in excess of 2 years to deliver that building. We have a 106 obligation that requires us to have this building built and fitted out as described earlier, prior to that first occupation of the data center building. So we're very incentivized to bring this forward as soon as possible. There's a lot of economies of scale of bringing this forward in conjunction with the first data hall as well, from a construction perspective as well. So in terms of when we would anticipate this building being sort of first used, as a sort of best guess, I think you're looking at probably early 2027. So we do have quite a bit of time in front of us. So to turn our attention to that management plan and the digital connectivity strategy as well, that we need to agree with the council. So in terms of engagement, yes, we've been started discussions with Arnhem Works. So we've had our inception meeting with them. So that dialogue is ongoing. We're also working quite hard in the local community to make sure residents and local community groups are fully aware of our progress, our timeline, what we're working to, when things are coming forward as well. So a newsletter was issued a couple of weeks ago, and regular newsletters will go out, which will inform residents of not just what's happening in terms of the data center buildings, but what's happening in terms of this building as well and its delivery. So we've got quite a nice, healthy period of time in front of us. So it's something that we'll be turning our attention to.
I guess my question is more in terms of the operation of any kind of management or bookable system. So long-term businesses and how that's managed versus education provision, and just a sense of what your approach.
Yeah, so I think the important thing to say is our business will retain the whole development. So there's no intention of sort of building something and selling it off. So we're invested for the long run. So that has its advantages in terms of we're managing these assets, and then we're able to enter into those dialogues sort of as the provider as such. In terms of bookings and things like that, I say that is part of the management plan that we need to have agreed. So we have an obligation to set up a system online whereby people will have full visibility and access to what rooms are available, who wants to use them. We've also already developed a really strong relationship with University of East London. So we're sponsoring some of their courses there, boot camp courses and things like that. So very much talking to UEL around the opportunity for them to bring students to the site, and hosting events within the MFB, and then bringing the operators of the data halls, the hyperscalers, into that space as well. So they get that sort of kind of almost face-to-face interaction with the businesses that are occupying the data space. Sorry, does that answer?
No, that really helps actually, which is great. And can I just also pick up on just the job creation opportunities, and appreciate there'll be some flexibility in that depending on the nature of end users. But just around any work you're doing around local employment within that space, or any kind of commitments around that.
Yeah, so we've got obviously the commitments within the 106 agreement, and like I say, we've started those discussions with our new work. So we've got the obligations in terms of local labour during the construction period. So we've got a contractor appointed on the main data centre campus, and they're actively already sort of engaging and looking to recruit locally. So the same, we'll adopt the same approach for every element of the project. So whether it's the data hall or the MFB, whatever it might be. So those commitments are there. Those discussions have started with our new works. We'll work together collaboratively with them to ensure that local people have every opportunity, and like I say, using newsletters and other sort of bulletins and things just to make sure people know where the development is, what it is, and what those opportunities will be. So the newsletters do reference the opportunities for jobs not only during construction but during the operational phases as well.
Councillor Verdi, do you have any questions?
I do, a couple of questions really. A little bit more about the community use instead. I know we're looking at a number of years down the road, but obviously the community is changing in its way, how it is. And obviously we've got different communities coming into the borough. So how are you going to make sure that you're engaging with them when it comes to the use of the facilities, and more importantly, community groups? Because obviously when we look at our borough, it's diverse. So how is that going to be impacted? And inclusive, because I say inclusive in the sense that when we look at some of our youngsters now, and some of them do have difficulties, i.e. autism and other elements as well. So what I would want to see is obviously a community facility for everyone. And how are we going to engage those groups? How early on are we going to look at some of the facilities? Could be JF Kennedy School, for example, which we have. How we can try to engage those so they have a real input of what's going to happen. So that would be interesting. I know a couple of years away yet, but I think that would be important, and would be really good that you come back to us sometime in the future and say, look, this is what we've done. So for us to keep us abreast with what's going on, for me, that's very important now, in the sense that where we are going as a borough in the future.
Yeah, no, all very, very good points. And, I think we acknowledge we're sort of kind of new to the area. We're investing in Newham. So we're actively looking to develop those relationships and understand who's who and who those community groups are. We've developed a good relationship with West Silvertown Foundation in Britannia Village on the other side of the road, for example. Already mentioned our working relationship with UEL. Something that we do that's worked really well on other sort of more logistics-led projects is that we develop what we call a community liaison forum. And it's something that where we bring representatives from those community groups together on a quarterly basis to kind of share ideas, also to understand what their requirements and their needs are. So that's something that we're committed to. So we'll be looking to set up a formal community liaison forum that will sit on a quarterly basis in person in the area locally, and then that way we can bring in those kind of key individuals and stakeholders.
And is that connected with local councillors around the Canning Town area as well?
It can be. It's not an obligation on us, so it's something that we'll do it as part of our prerogative. But yeah, so we've done it very effectively elsewhere, and what we normally do is try and sort of identify a sort of a catchment area, a radius around the development, and sort of try and capture everyone within that kind of key radius. But we'd be happy to work with the council to help us establish what we think is a kind of, you know, a reasonable sort of distance from the development where there's key stakeholders and individuals.
And to give your officers credit, I think that flexibility is exactly what they've asked us to think about in the design. So I think it's in your committee report. There's lots of different internal layout options that can deal with small community groups, or if somebody wants to take the whole space for a period of time. So the aim is it is literally a multi-function building with flexibility built in, so that a wide range of community users can use it.
Okay, if that's, are there any more?
Can I just add one other thing?
Very quickly, yes.
Yeah, just to add, I understand we're looking at the local area. Might be worthwhile to look just outside the local area as well,
Yeah, sure.
because there are different.
We'll engage with officers on that and understand what that kind of catchment area looks like, really.
Okay, if there are no further questions from the panel, then I will move to Councillor Young.
It's a very mere question about biodiversity, which I realise is not an obligation to you under where we were with the legislation. But if you could talk about your approach to that, that would be very helpful to me.
So this is a quite small reserve matters in the context of the overall scheme. And so as part of the planning permission that has been granted, that was presented to the committee last year, on our kind of overall biodiversity net gain strategy, and performing well and was granted planning permission. So this is a very, very small basically.
But it's got green roof, PV panels. So yeah, we have, you know, we've
sustainable facades.
Yeah, we've tried to maximise the opportunity in terms of what we've got. But as Chris says, it's part of a much bigger campus. But also, you know, I think there are a couple of plans in the committee report which kind of really highlights the extent of the public realm. The landscaping along the whole site frontage is quite significant. At the moment, it's quite sort of hard concrete with lots of access points into the development itself. So a number of those existing accesses get removed, and we've got a really, really strong landscape sort of front to the site as well.
Thank you. Fantastic. I think as we've exhausted the committee questions, it's probably time to move to officers to frame the decision.
Yes, question from Councillor Pointing online.
Sorry, Councillor Ponting, I can't see a hand from you online. Did you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I can't find where the hands are online. Which is why.
Okay.
So thank you for that. My apologies for joining late and remotely. I've just come from a Heritage Centre meeting, so I was just wondering how close this facility is to the new Heritage Centre, and whether the use of the community space and the any digital sharing of skills will be taken in consideration with the new Archive Heritage Centre.
In Canning Town. So
not something I'm familiar with.
Okay, maybe that's a conversation then for outside of the meeting.
Yeah, and I think we'll be linking in with Anya.
Fine.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. So in that case, with the blessing of the committee, I'll move to the officer decision. So the Strategic Development Committee is asked to resolve to agree the reasons for approval and grant the reserve matters application in accordance with the condition and informatives listed in Appendix 1 of the report. Are we agreeable? Excellent, that's carried. So you're welcome to stay, but you're also free to go. So thank you very much for attending.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we now move on to agenda item 7. So I don't know whether people for agenda item 7 want to come forward. So this is Silvertown Quays, bounded by Royal Victoria Dock, Connaught Bridge and Mill Road, North Woolwich Road, Silvertown, London, E6 1UR. Everyone's question. Fantastic. So James and Alistair, you've got 5 minutes to outline your application for us.
Could we pull up the presentation?
Liam's overridden me.
Sorry, Shirley.
What's the thing at the moment? Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Masters, and thank you, committee members. My name is James and I am the Development Manager at Silvertown, and I'm here to present Plot 78 today on behalf of the Silvertown Partnership. Presenting with me today, we have Alistair from DP9, who is leading on planning, and we also have members of our design team, including Laura Gaskell and Graham Howarth from the architect Howard Tompkins, and Andrew Thornhill from landscape architect Birchman Thornhill Finch, all of whom will be available to answer any questions you may have. We are all delighted to be here to present the Plot 78 proposal today, which, if approved tonight, will deliver 600 new homes in Newham, of which 29% will be affordable. It's only been 55 days since the Silvertown project was here for its last planning committee when Plot 1D2D was granted consent. Plot 78's closely followed application and subsequent committee today hopefully reinforces that we are prioritising and accelerating the delivery of homes in Newham and the Royal Docks. I'd like to now hand over to Alistair, who will provide a technical summary of the application.
Thank you, James, and good evening, Chair and members of the committee. If you could go to the next, please. Thank you. You can see on the plan the location of the 4 blocks and associated courtyards, which comprise Plot 78 and Phase 1.9A, which is the public realm and landscaping that surrounds Plot 78. To the west, you can see Plot 6, which is nearing completion, and to the north, you can see the recently approved Plots 1D and 2D. Plot 78 is a residential-led plot comprising 600 homes, 174 of which are proposed to be affordable. These affordable homes are a combination of London affordable rent and shared ownership. Along with Plot 6, 1D and 2D, this means that 59% of the first 1,032 homes planned to be delivered on site will be affordable. This reinforces the commitment to early delivery of affordable housing on site, and the Guinness Partnership is confirmed as the provider of all affordable homes in Phase 1. The homes in Plot 78 are supported by extensive external amenity space for residents, including play space, and at ground floor, fronting North Woolwich Road, are 2 flexible non-residential units, which provide high-quality activation of North Woolwich Road. The public realm and landscaping proposals seek to maximise biodiverse urban greening and amenity for residents and the wider Royal Docks community. Next slide, please. In preparing the proposals for Plot 78, we've carried out a focused public engagement exercise, which included a public exhibition at the Royal Docks Summer Splash event, and the public consultation exercise found overwhelming support for the delivery of the development and the activation it would bring to North Woolwich Road. Slide, please.
Thank you. We are incredibly proud to present these designs to the committee today, particularly the northwest facing canal side, which you can see, which has been successfully designed as both an attractive local canal side residential street with front doors to 2-storey duplex homes, but also subtly serves as the plot's main servicing artery for the purpose of waste and deliveries to all 600 homes. Next slide, please. We would like to thank Ben Hull and the design review panel for the collaborative and robust design conversations on which, together with the public consultation feedback, have culminated in this high quality final proposal you see for you today. We are delighted with the all-round quality of the residential homes and landscaping proposed as part of this application, and we believe this will be an attractive place to live for future residents. Next slide, please. Another area of pride to highlight within the proposal is the emergence of the entrance to the local centre, with high levels of activation across the whole ground floor plane of the proposals, and perhaps most notably on North Woolwich Road, where we have circa 900 square metres of flexible retail commercial spaces and multiple residential entrances and amenity spaces. Next slide, please. Thank you. Despite the relatively short amount of time since our last committee update, a significant milestone has very nearly been achieved on Plot 6 with the completion of the external brickwork, and we're still on track to welcoming our first Silvertown residents by the autumn. We continue to deliver in partnership with Homes England to deliver significant enabling works on site via our infrastructure loan, and work closely with the GLA and the Guinness Partnership, with whom the latter will be the registered provider for the 174 affordable homes submitted within the Plot 78 proposals. In closing, if you are minded to grant consent to Plot 78 this evening, it will result in a cumulative total of 1,032 homes, of which 59% will be affordable, demonstrating our commitment to accelerating affordable housing at Silvertown, a fantastic milestone. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So again, I'm not aware of anyone here to express objections. So that being the case, we move on to the officer's report, and I think that's you, Liam.
Yep, thank you. Okay, can I just double check you can all see that?
It's coming through.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair. This is item 7, Silvertown Quays, Plot 78. So the applicant has already taken you through this. You're obviously where the application is, and as they mentioned, plots 1D and 2D in the sort of centre there came to committee in January. So this is a sort of continuation of this wider development. So this is an application for reserve matters relating to the scale, appearance, layout, access and landscaping for phases 1.78, which is plot 78, and 1.9A in accordance with the outline permission granted in 2016. It would consist of 4 blocks ranging between 12 and 16 stories and provide 600 residential units. So Greg already mentioned this, but I've just got a small note here that reserve matters of applications are to assess and approve those matters which were reserved as part of the parent outline permission. So it's not an opportunity to go back and reassess the principal development or renegotiate any obligations attached to that parent permission. So a bit of background quickly, the outline permission, this is known as the OPP. As mentioned, it was granted in August 2016. I won't read out that development description, but you can essentially it's just a huge regeneration and redevelopment of the entire site. There is a new application which has been submitted. This is a hybrid application. It's known as the HPA, and that is intended to replace the OPP. That's currently under assessment separately. So just for clarity, this application is only to approve the reserve matters specifically related to the OPP. In terms of consultation, we consulted around 7,233 neighbours, and we received 1 objection in response. The objection focused mainly on the daylight and sunlight received to internal spaces. I noticed that some units only achieve minimum standards, and the objector felt that this could be improved. We have taken note of this. The applicant has also provided a response from their daylight and sunlight assessor. Whilst we do acknowledge it, BRE guidance is not to be applied mechanically. It's very normal part of development when you develop large buildings that not every room in the development will achieve the maximum standards. However, we are satisfied that overall, across the development as a whole, the daylight and sunlight levels remain high. So the key planning considerations are the compliance with the outline permission, transport, landscaping, and environmental impacts. So first, in the compliance with the outline permission, we begin with the quantum of development. So the OPP is divided into different phases and development zones. The diagram on the screen now shows you the 7 development zones. Each of these zones will have a maximum amount of floor space, as will the entire development. So this is to prevent an over-concentration of any one use in one particular part of the site. And this is also true of the affordable housing and housing mix. Moving on to that, the affordable provision on this element would be 29%, with a 10-year split of approximately 49% London affordable rent and 51% intermediate housing. 9% of the units would be family units. So I'll just note here that number does appear low, but this just goes back to my point that the reserve matters it's a small piece of the larger puzzle. So although some phases will have lower amounts of family units, it's expected that overall the schemes as they come forward would achieve what is in the housing strategy. So on this level, we are satisfied that the developments so far are in accordance with the quantums of development. In terms of scale and layout, the outline permission was granted with parameter plans which set out the maximum extents, heights and locations of the buildings. the application complies with all of those plans. The units, 62% of them would be dual aspect. And as mentioned, the daylight and sunlight levels, the units would be high across the wider development and including the open space included within that development. All of the units would achieve the required minimum space standards and have access to amenity space in the form of balconies or public open space. So in terms of the scale and layout, we consider it to be acceptable. Moving on to appearance, the outline permission was assessed by DRP at the time of that application. As part of that approval, a design guide document was approved, which sets out the expected details, materials, and other design aspects, which will need to be complied with any further reserve matters as they come forward. This application has been assessed by the design team, and they consider that it does comply with this design guide and is generally acceptable. There are some conditions recommended to secure the final detailing of some of the entrances to buildings and to finalise the landscaping. And subject to those conditions, the proposal is acceptable in terms of its appearance. In terms of access, the outline permission had plans which showed the access routes for vehicles and pedestrians. This includes the hierarchy of streets, and the application is laid out in accordance with this approved layout. So apologies for the typo there. Tracking diagrams and information on pavement widths have also been provided and are considered acceptable. One key point on the access to bring to your attention is there would be a temporary access created on the eastern side. So just to the east of the block, immediately within the red line boundary. On the left-hand drawing, that's a temporary access. So that will be used for the intermediate period before the remaining development comes forward. The diagram on your right is where the eventual street will go. So we have a condition which requires that this temporary access is removed when it is no longer needed. So it would remove the access onto North Woolwich Road, and then there would be an assessment of what replaces that, the intent being some kind of hard or soft landscaping is most likely. So car parking on the OPP was subject to conditions, and those set out the maximum amounts of car parking, and they required construction management plans, delivery and servicing plans, and other documents for approval by our transport officers. The proposal includes 18 blue badge spaces, which have been provided, and they do conform with that condition. Likewise, 1,070 cycle spaces are provided, and there is a condition attached to secure the final detail of the cycle parking, so the type of shelter and that kind of thing. In that respect, the application is acceptable in terms of transport. Moving on to landscaping. So as with floor space, there are conditions which dictate the amounts and the areas for the landscaping. So in this instance, each of the blocks have a central kind of courtyard area, and the application would comply with the requirements on the OPP. Suitable provision for play space has also been provided. So we are content that the landscaping is acceptable. So the OPP was subject to an environmental impact assessment and was improved with an environmental statement. As part of the current application is a requirement of reserve matters to submit a statement of conformity. So this document just demonstrates that what's being proposed is in line with all the measures that were assessed under the environmental statement. So we have assessed that, and we consider that it does comply. There's no conflict. So to summarise, the application would comply with the requirements of the OPP. It would have an acceptable layout, access and appearance, and it would contribute towards the borough's housing and affordable housing stocks. And we therefore recommend it for approval. So the committee is asked to note the committee update report and resolve to agree the reasons for approval set out in the report and approve the reserve matters subject to the conditions listed in Appendix 1 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Liam. I think my first question's about landscaping and planting. So I've noted on page 112 of our agenda that full landscaping plan will be submitted and approved at a later stage. So I'm just wondering when that's likely to come through.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to answer that. So we've submitted indicative landscape drawings which show the full intent of the landscape design, but obviously there are further details to work through on that. And I think the intention, I'm just looking for the condition, but the intention is that would be required prior to occupation, but in reality it would be submitted as part of the detailed design process for the landscape design, allowing enough time before it is required to be delivered as part of the development.
Okay, so we were a while off, basically. And the other thing is on point 115, page 113 of our agenda, as part of the open space refers to 1,216 square metres of play space catering to a variety of ages would be included. Do you want to say a bit more about that? I'm slightly concerned that part of it's being located on a roof terrace.
Yeah, if I could bring in Andrew to answer that.
Good evening, yeah. So there are a variety of play spaces that occupy the residential courtyards in amongst blocks. We've combined natural play with sort of multi-generational opportunities as well. So we have a really broad spectrum of play opportunity that exists here. That's in addition to the public realm that will be part of Silo D as well. And the space that will be created to the east of the development as well, where we have the access, will also become a public open space with play along the way opportunities as well. So in combination, it provides a really rich offer. And as I say, it's sort of focused around natural play principally. There are some areas of equipment. We've also taken advantage of the level change that occurred between one of the courtyards. So we have a whole sort of 3 metre level change with slides and climbing apparatus and things as well. So it's really quite imaginative in the way it responds to the architecture.
Okay, so we'll probably need to see the full plans to get the full impression of that. Do we have any questions from the committee? Councillor Young.
I think my question is more for Liam, actually, and just in terms of the design review panel, and I noted a number of comments and just wondered what the process had been from there and the kind of applicant's response to that.
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, so the design review comments are actually from the original commission in 2016. I'm afraid that's before I worked here, so I don't know the exact details of those discussions. But the net result of those was that the design guide that they came up with is essentially a document that any application that comes forward needs to comply with. So that is things like the type of materials, the general sort of detailed design. The intent for that being that it's consistent across all the phases, so we don't end up with the next plot looking completely different. As I say, the design officers have reviewed that and they're quite content in that respect. And then the other side to design is usually the scale, the size of it. That again has been already approved as part of the parameter plans, as I discussed in my presentation.
Okay, Councillor Birding, have you got any questions?
A question just for my peace of mind. Obviously, when we talk about the mix of the housing, is that part of the condition we have?
That's not under discussion this evening with about reserve matters.
Understand that. Okay, well, I'll leave that there.
Okay, is there anything else you want to ask about? Okay. Councillor Beckles?
Thanks. It's just about the cycle parking spaces. At the end of about 1 and does say that it would be part of a separate application made. Separate application, or what kind of would you provide for cycle parking spaces, secure on-street holes?
Yeah. So the number of cycle parking spaces is fixed in the application. This condition is about the detailed design of the cycle parking spaces. I don't know, do you guys want to talk about the?
Yeah, so all of those spaces, cycle parking spaces, are located within the building. They all have secure access doors. We've reviewed the access and design of those stores with a design officer as well, and also thought with transport officers about how we can make the spaces attractive to be used, kind of making the zones much smaller so that the stores don't appear big and expansive and off-putting for people to use bicycles and store them there.
Another question around landscaping. In terms of the upkeep and maintenance of that, would that come out of the service charges imposed on residents, or will that be part of just the wider company taking that on in terms of?
So it will be managed in two ways, whereby on plot there is a landscape provision that will be managed by the facilities management team that within the plot, and the associated maintenance costs would be owned and paid for by the residents within that plot. And then there's a wider landscape provision in the rest of the master plan that is served by a similar but separate entity or separate process.
Okay, Councillor Sarli Ponting, I see you've got a question online. Do you want to state that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Could I just check those flats that have below optimum light levels, are they dual aspect or are they single aspect?
Councillor, I might pass that on to Laura to explain from our architects the daylight levels and the approach that the design to be taken to ensure that we are maximising daylight levels.
Yeah, the layout of the massing, you'll see the 4 blocks are orientated north-south, which means that it opens wide gaps to the south to allow solar penetration into the central courtyards and to the elevations of the buildings. We've maximised dual aspect homes, and that's 62%, and there's no north-facing single aspect homes across the development, and all of the family homes are dual aspect as well. We did test the daylight sunlight iteratively throughout the design process, and that has been a core part of our design process, and we think we've really optimised the results for this site.
Okay, can I just ask a quick subsequent question, please, Chair?
Yes, go for it.
Thank you. So those homes that do have below optimum light levels are the ones in the central blocks that have east and west facing windows, am I correct?
It's okay, Chair, we might bring in our daylight and sunlight consultant.
That would be useful. Thank you.
Paolo.
Yes, so there are 2 aspects to consider, daylight and sunlight. So they are assessed separately, but essentially the daylight has been optimized, and where there are rooms that fall below, they have been optimized. So the habitable portion of the room, such as, for example, in living spaces, that will be the living room that's brought forward window, and then all these living spaces are also provided balconies, which provide additional valuable private amenity space, but that's obviously also a trade-off of amenities between, private open space and daylight. So in that sense, there has been a lot of thought that time, and also there's obviously competing design factors such as also overheating, which is a consideration in relation to sunlight. So all things considered, the layouts for the units that fall below recommendation, as is normal in high density regeneration schemes, are considered to be adequate, and actually consider all the optimization has gone through the design process.
Are you happy with your answers, Councillor Sarli Ponting, or do you want to come back?
Oh, thank you, Chair. I was just trying to ascertain, I know that in many houses, we have rooms that do not necessarily have direct sunlight, although they have good light. And what I'm trying to ascertain is whether any of the flats are constantly in shadow.
No, seems to be the answer.
So I guess
Shaking heads.
Yeah, I'll see if you want to go.
Well, I was going to say that there are no north-facing single aspect units, so we made sure in the design that we're mitigating against that.
Yeah, and I guess the best way to surmise it would be that there will always be some apartments within the building that perform better than others, but even at the minimum level, they perform adequately. And the design team has spent quite a lot of time working out how we can ensure that is maximised to its maximum potential. For example, specifying brick colours that reflect light, that allow light to penetrate into the development as much as possible.
Okay, thank you for that.
And is that your finding, Liam? Are we satisfied as officers?
Yeah, that's what I touched on slightly in my presentation. The BRE guidance, which tells us how to assess daylight and sunlight, does say you shouldn't apply it mechanically. It's not a simple pass or fail. There are many factors that we take into account, what the room is used for. One of the big ones I think the consultant just touched on was if a room has a balcony. If you imagine if your neighbour upstairs has a balcony as well, you probably will get less light to a window. However, in planning terms, we consider that provision of private amenity space to kind of outweigh that that impact. So yeah, we are satisfied that overall the quality is fine.
Fantastic. Okay, do we have any further questions from the Councillor Young?
I have two more, I'm sorry. So I noted on page 109 about the material choices and the link to the heritage assets, and obviously Millennium Mills and Silo D being really quite striking buildings in this part of the borough, and wondered if you could speak to that a little more. And then also just the following paragraph on page 110 around the commercial frontages, and recognise that will be secured via conditions, but wondered if there were any thoughts on the design of those, the possible end uses at this point.
I think for the first, thank you, Councillor. I think for the first question, Laura, if you could, and Graham could cover and ask a question in relation to the industrial influence on the scheme and the colour schemes that have been proposed.
Yeah, the heritage assets have really informed the design response in terms of trying to create a narrative that creates a setting for particularly the Silo D building. So we've tried to create a well-defined edge to that building so that when it's seen from Silo D Park, it's silhouetted against a neutral background. It's nothing too shouty. And then the other way, we've allowed views up from North Woolwich Way to that building as well. We've also taken some clues from the sort of composition of Silo D and Millennium Mills. So Millennium Mills is a very neutral, quite plain surface. So our buildings have sort of echoed that to a degree. But they've also picked up some of the influence of the Silo D building, which has a sort of very articulate framing. So it has bookends with linking pieces. And we've literally sort of taken inspiration from that in the form of the blocks. So we have 4 linear blocks that form bookends. And then between those blocks, we have these linking pieces that echo that sort of design motif from the Silo D building. So in one way, we're sort of paying respect to it, but also we're trying to create a neutrality that doesn't challenge it in some ways. So we're trying to sort of play a complex game. But the heritage assets are really just a key DNA of the site that we've tried to enhance and build on, really.
Thank you.
And the second question was about the commercial frontage.
Yes.
North Woolwich Road. Yeah. Did you guys want to explain?
Yeah, I think that the strategy in terms of the shop fronts as well is another detail that picks up on the heritage assets, and it is designed in a way that responds to Millennium Mills and Silo D, and it kind of is quite attractive and links to the frontage of the masonettes as well. So
yeah.
The whole base is a continuous language reflecting that heritage.
So they have those sort of industrial looking windows with horizontal crystal type windows that give that sort of connection at street level. Well, the base is 3 stories on Woolwich Road and it's 2 stories to the canal side. And we think that sort of where people see most of the building, that tactile edge responds to the sort of industrial setting of the water side and Silo D and then up to the Millennium Mill. So we're trying to sort of bring that character through into the. It also permeates into the hard landscape that Andrew's designed in terms of the granite sets, the stone bases and the seating benches that are on the edge of the canal side. So we trying to create a calm, sort of wharf-like environment that the buildings respond to.
Lovely. Thank you.
Fantastic. It doesn't look like I have any further questions from the committee. So in that case, I will go to the decision. Can that be chaired, please?
Yes, 1 second. Can you see that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
The application would comply with the requirements of the OPP, would have an acceptable layout, access and appearance, and would contribute towards the borough's housing and affordable housing stocks. It is therefore recommended for approval. So the Strategic Development Committee is asked to note the committee update and resolve to agree the reasons for approval as set out in the report and approve the reserved matters subject to the conditions listed in Appendix 1 of the report. Is that agreed?
Agreed, Chair.
Excellent. So that's agreed. So thank you very much for coming. So again, you're welcome to stay, but if not, you're free to leave.
Thank you, thank you very much.
Just suggest if we just, while one team leave and the other team move into position, we just have a quick comfort break for members of the committee. So if anyone needs to conveniences. Everything, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Very much.
Thank you. So we'll just go live
You
again.
will hear us now.
Excellent. We're all back in the room. So give me a shout when we're live.
Oh, we are like, yeah, well, just put holding that notice up.
Excellent, thank you. So welcome back to this meeting of strategic development. We're now moving on to agenda item 8, land at 6870 High Street, E15 to NE. So I'm going to hand over to Bradley, Cole, Sean, Mark, Lizzie.
Thank you.
And team.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee members, for the opportunity to present our application for 6070 High Street this evening. My name is Bradley Carter and I'm Development Director for Pickstock Group. We're a family-owned business with over 40 years of experience in development and construction with projects delivered in London and across the UK. I'm joined by members of our professional team, both in person, which I'll hand over to next, and online to field any questions you have. Over the last few years, we've worked closely with both the LLDC and London Borough of Newham, as well as local stakeholders to produce a scheme you see tonight. If one to resolve the application, we'll continue to progress and work closely with officers to see the scheme become a reality. I'll now hand over to Anne, our architect.
Hello, Paul Van Pollard from Sedwoods. So a very quick design summary from myself. This proposal provides presentation. Is it okay to have the presentation, please?
Sorry, I thought one of those team members.
Yes, please, if you could.
Okay, apologies, Chair.
I've paused.
Thank you. Thanks.
You've got 4 minutes left anyway.
Okay, it's just a minute and a half.
Oh, that's fine then.
Yeah, and then I'll hand over.
Not shared at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I'll see next. Yeah, I won't cover quantum things. This is just a design summary in the order we're doing it. This proposal provides a new public landscape and 2 high-quality buildings inspired by the history of the location. The tenure-blind approach extends from the building finishes to the design of generous entrance spaces for all residents. On landscape play and movement, the proposal does not privatise the river edge, next slide please, but instead safeguards a future bus connection and provides a new garden and play spaces connecting the Bowback River to Stratford High Street. A net uplift of 36 trees, 220% biodiversity net gain, and an urban greening factor of 0.3. Next slide, please. This one. In terms of arrangement, a new community-faced cafe and performance venue overlooks the garden and play spaces for both local creative industries, national programme of jazz concerts and exhibitions. In addition, the public routes are overlooked by 24-hour resident concierge, workspace and gym. And to stay on this slide, homes above are arranged to ensure that all 2-bed and larger homes are dual aspect. 38% of the affordable homes are for 3 bedrooms for families, and the buildings are all designed to current safety standards, including 2 staircases. Next slide, please. This proposal reflects a holistic approach to sustainable development in policy terms, providing much needed housing, community space, 650 secure cycle spaces, increases the ecological value of the site, and is designed to an operational net zero carbon target. And I'll hand over to Mark on the call if it's there.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Mark.
Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I'm just going to quickly take you through our rationale behind this. Jazz East, just for clarity, Jazz East is the trading name of London East Jazz Network CIC, a community interest company operating as East London and Essex's premier jazz development agency. We already have experience of working in Newham, both with the council as clients and working to support Newham Music, the music education hub already based in Westfield. We're active members of the UK's Jazz Trade Association, where I'm a trustee, and I'm chair of the National Jazz Archive, the UK's only archive dedicated to the preservation, promotion, presentation of the art and culture of all forms of jazz, currently based in Loughton in Essex. Newham is an Arts Council England priority area, and as such, we're keen to support this application and welcome the opportunity to operate an arts and culture themed community space at 68 to 70 Stratford High Street. We see this as an exciting opportunity, not just to promote jazz music, but to support the community aspects of this important development through music and other performance. As the Jazz Hub's operator, as we're calling it at this stage, we would work closely with experienced local social enterprises and entrepreneurs to operate a range of all-day community projects, including the community cafe, a flexible workspace, a destination grassroots music.
Okay, you have 30 seconds left on your presentation, your total presentation.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I really didn't realise. Our daytime focus is around education and using the space for the National Jazz Archive, running schools programs, etc., running permanent exhibitions. We'll be looking at making sure from a sound perspective that we use technology that is available to numb the sound considerably. And jazz is predominantly an acoustic music, and we would be looking at acoustic jazz, rock and folk. And as it's always been the basis for most popular music, it's heritage that will actually help be using the heritage of the music to break down barriers. And
okay, you've had your 5 minutes, I'm afraid.
Next slide as well, if we could, just to finish.
Okay.
Yes, sure. Oh, that one's fine. Cool.
Okay.
We did have,
thank you.
Thank you. Speaker, is there? No,
I mean, you've had the same 5 minutes that everybody else has had tonight. I'm really sorry. So thanks for that. So moving, do we have any objectors attending this evening? No, so in that case, we move to the officer report.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, can I confirm you're seeing that?
Here we go.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair. This is item 8, 68 70 High Street, Stratford. Sorry, my screen is frozen. I can't change page. There we go. This is the location of the site on Stratford with the Bowback River to the rear of it. So the application is a redevelopment of the site to provide 2 buildings, 27 floors and 11 floors, which could comprise of 355 residential units and a cafe, which can also be used as a music venue, alongside the ancillary car parking, cycle parking and refuse storage, as well as landscape and public realm improvements. So just to begin with, I need to set out the policy context on this. This application actually falls within the boundary of the LLDC's planning area. The powers that allowed the LLDC to determine applications has fallen back to Newham now. So this application is before you as Newham councillors. However, the LLDC local plan is the most up-to-date policies which we would assess this application. So when I refer to the local plan, both in the report and in this presentation, I'm actually referring to the LLDC local plan. So there may be some slight differences in policy, which hopefully I'll take you through as we go through. I'll also draw your attention to the update report. It has some minor corrections to some of the wording. There is an additional condition on the operation times for the music, which I'll come on to. There was an additional response from Natural England, which I'll also come on to. And then an important one here is the consultation of the Canal and Rivers Trust. They are a statutory consultee. Unfortunately, they were missed off. We have consulted them yesterday once it was brought to my attention. So you'll notice in the resolution at the end of the presentation, we've added a caveat that if they were to raise any new material considerations, we would bring it back to the committee to review. However, we expect that their comments are normally very minor. The applicant has been working with them at the outset of the design, so we're not expecting any major concerns from them. I'd also note 2 additional objections were received from members of the public who can't attend, so they have asked that you are showing them. So I pasted them in full in the update report, and hopefully you will have had time to review those. In terms of consultation responses, we sent out 498 letters and we received 14 responses. 1 was neutral and 13 were objecting. To summarize the objections, they mainly focused around loss of daylight and sunlight, concerns over the height, loss of views, impact on traffic and parking from residents and construction, potential congestion on Marshgate Lane, and overlooking and loss of privacy, and the noise impact of music venue. And I'll come on to those in a bit. So the key planning considerations here are the principle of development, the housing mix and affordable housing, design and appearance, the impact on amenity, quality of accommodation, biodiversity, transport and travel, environmental impact assessment, and fire safety. So beginning with the principle of development, on the residential side of things, there are no policies which object to residential development in this location. There was also a permission which was previously granted on the site for redevelopment to residential, and that is an extant permission, so it is a material consideration. But nonetheless, we have no policy objections to residential development here. For the community cafe, the local plan policies support evening and nighttime uses within the wider area. LLDC's policies do require that major development contributes towards community uses. And this is a point I'd like to place some emphasis on due to some of the objections. The cafe is primarily a community use, with the music events only being on some weekends. So I think some of the objections were concerned about it being a music venue primarily. So just to clarify, this isn't like the ABBA experience over the road. This is a cafe that sometimes puts on music and mainly serves a community function. So as part of the agreements, the applicants have agreed to charge only 50% market rate for the cafe, only to be increased in line with indexation. The intent of that is to support the community use, to make it more viable for smaller community uses to occur there. But as we already know, the Jazz East has expressed an interest. They have been working with the applicant from early stages of the development. So the intent there, as they were saying, was to provide a kind of cafe, archive and music space. So in principle, the land use of development is considered acceptable. Moving on to the housing mix and the affordable housing. So 75% of the units would be build to rent on a Habroom basis, and 25% would be affordable with a 10-year split of 61% social rented and 39% intermediate housing. So policy normally requires that split to be 60-40. In this case, it's 61-39. However, the benefit, if you like, is towards social rented, which is actually a more required tenure. So we consider that to be acceptable. Of the units, 50% would be family units. So this is one of the points I'll just draw attention to. Newham policy defines family units as 3-bed or more. However, the LLDC policies, which this is being assessed under, define it as 2-bed or more. So in that respect, it would provide a large amount of family units. Nonetheless, we have worked with the applicants. We did stress that regardless of LLDC's policy, 3-bed units are particularly important to Newham, particularly in affordable provision. And so they have worked with us to maximise the amount of affordable provision in 3 beds. So 30% of the affordable would be 3-bed units, which is very welcome. 10% of units would be adaptable or wheelchair accessible in accordance with policy. So a financial viability assessment has been provided and independently reviewed by BNP Paribas, who conclude that the proposal represents the maximum amount of affordable housing possible on the site. And we're also satisfied that the build to rent element would not compromise that level of affordable housing when compared to a traditional private sales scheme. So the housing mix and affordable housing are considered to be acceptable. Moving on to design and appearance. The proposal consists of 2 taller tower blocks with a large landscaped area in the middle. The scheme was presented to LLDC's quality review panel, so this is similar to our own design review panel prior to the submission with Newham. There was discussion with our design officers of whether we bring it back to DRP after submission to NUM because the QRP no longer exists. The advice from our design officers was that would not be good practice because different panels may have different opinions. Design is obviously a little bit subjective. And in this instance, we're very happy with the overall design, so we didn't feel it was necessary to do that. One of the changes we did make prior to submission at the ground floor was initially a large car parking area, and we worked with the applicants to change this to a undercroft parking system to allow a lot more soft landscaping and public realm in the middle, which we feel has really benefited the scheme a lot. So the proposals are tall, however, they are in keeping with the prevailing height in the area. This part of Stratford has a lot of tall buildings, so we are comfortable that this height fits within that. And the overall design has been reviewed by our design officers, which, as I say, they're very happy with the landscaping in particular, the materials and the general design of the scheme. So on balance, we consider that the design is acceptable. Moving on to impact on residential amenity, a daylight and sunlight assessment, which was undertaken, and it demonstrates the impacts on nearby buildings and open spaces would be acceptable. As part of the environmental impact assessment, noise and vibration impacts were also assessed and also considered acceptable, subject to the conditions that were imposed as part of that assessment, which I'll come on to. There is a condition, it's in the update report, to limit the times in which the cafe can be used as a music venue, just to ensure that the events are not in hours which would be disruptive to nearby residences. There are also conditions to ensure that adequate sound insulation is provided to the new units, that they also are not affected by not just the cafe, but general noise from the high street and other things like that. We note the comments on some objections about the noise from construction. You can never fully mitigate that, but we do have a standard condition for a construction management plan that will be assessed by our transport colleagues, and that would include information such as the types of vehicles, what times they are used, and things like that to hopefully mitigate those impacts as much as we can. We do note the objections, noting a loss of a view. However, the planning system doesn't protect individual views. The closest thing would be outlook, which we have assessed and considered to be acceptable. So on balance, we consider the impact on neighbouring amenity to be acceptable. Moving on to the quality of the accommodation, all of the units would comply with the minimum space standards. They would all have balconies and shared amenity space, and approximately 50% would be dual aspect. The daylight and sunlight assessment also indicates that the internal daylight and sunlight levels are acceptable. And as mentioned, 10% of units would be wheelchair accessible, with the remaining 90% adaptable. So we consider the equality of accommodation would be in line with policy and would be acceptable. Moving on to landscape and biodiversity. So the proposal would achieve a UGF score, that's an urban greening factor, of 0.43. That exceeds the 0.40 required by policy. As mentioned, the open space has been well designed, giving a sense of place. It would link the high street to the river behind it, which would be newly activated, which is a very welcome aspect of the design. The biodiversity net gain would be 220%, which is obviously far in excess of the 10% that is required. I would just draw your attention again to the update report, to the objection from Natural England. So to explain, the applicants are required to pay a SAMS payment. This is the Strategic Access Management and Monitoring Strategy payment, and it works at around £50 per unit. And this is applied to all development within a certain radius of Epping Forest. The idea being that the money goes towards improving the forest, improving access to it, and mitigating the impacts of an increased population that may be using that area. Natural England raised an objection. They considered that the scale of the development warranted an additional mitigation. Unfortunately, they didn't really specify what that would be. We have had discussions with the applicant. They volunteered a sum which will be secured as part of the legal agreement of £20,000 towards a SANG payment. So SANG is Suitable Alternative Green Spaces. What that means is money towards other green spaces in the borough to improve them. The idea being it would encourage new residents to go and use more local parks rather than going to Epping Forest, to kind of mitigate that. We did, for that that suggestion of a payment to Natural England. They have again requested further mitigation, but not specified what that may amount to. Officers have reviewed that. We do acknowledge that objection, but one thing we have to consider is the viability of the scheme. So the scheme at the moment is providing the maximum amount of affordable housing. Any further payments on top of what is being considered may impact the affordable housing, the general viability of the scheme. And on balance, taking into consideration all the above, so the very high levels of biodiversity net gain, the high quality public space in the middle, we do consider that the voluntary sum of £20,000 in our view is enough. So that objection is noted. However, on balance, we do consider this element of the proposal to be acceptable. So transport and travel, it would be car free other than blue badge holders, which would be 7 spaces. 660 cycle spaces would be provided. And the existing high street access would be removed. So this is the vehicular access to the site at present, in favour of the new access on Marshgate Lane, which is where the disabled, the blue badge holders would access the site into the Undercroft. Has been assessed by transport officers who raised no objection. We also had consultation from TfL. As part of that, TfL requested some mitigation, some financial contribution, I should say, towards improvements on the high street. We had some discussions with TfL and the applicants. We eventually settled on a contribution of £250,000. So I just quickly jump back to my previous point about viability and the biodiversity. So this is also being accounting of the money being put towards improvements on the high street. Again, if we don't reduce the affordable housing, it would perhaps come out of this, and then TfL would perhaps object. So it's a balancing aspect of the application, I would say. And as mentioned, the land for a future bridge is safeguarded as required by policy. So overall, we consider the transport aspects of the proposal to be acceptable. So this application is subject to an environmental impact assessment. So a full environmental statement has been submitted, and that included a number of topics, including air quality, noise and vibration, climate change, daylight and sunlight, wind microclimate, and archaeology. So this is a very detailed document which includes assessment of the potential impacts on those topics from the development and suggestions on how they may be mitigated against where necessary or minimized. That has been independently reviewed, so environmental statements can only be reviewed by a qualified assessor. In this case, we use Arup on behalf of the planning department of Newham. They did request some information during the process, which was received. They concluded their review and they suggested a number of conditions to ensure that the environmental impacts are properly mitigated against. So subject to those conditions, we consider that the environmental impacts are acceptable. Moving on to fire safety. In accordance with policy, a fire statement has been submitted, has been independently prepared. This was a document which contains potential fire prevention, mitigation methods, and emergency procedures that may be used in the development. This was assessed by the Health and Safety Executive, who raised no objections. And so on that basis, we are content that the fire safety element is acceptable in planning terms. So the overall conclusion, the proposal would be a high quality design. It would contain significant amount of landscaping and public realm improvements. It would provide a very welcome community use in the area, which serve the local community and evening uses. It would contribute towards the borough's housing stock and affordable housing. It would include financial contributions towards biodiversity and TfL improvements. And subject to the conditions, we consider the impacts of the development would be managed and mitigated as far as they can. Therefore, we consider the scheme to be acceptable. Therefore, the recommendation, the committee is asked to note the contents of the update report and resolve to agree the reasons for approval as set out in the report. In the event that no new material considerations are raised by the Canal Rivers Trust, we refer this application to the Mayor of London for the stage 2. If new material considerations are raised, we shall bring this back to SCD to review. Subject to Mayor of London advising that it is content to allow the council to determine the application itself, delegate the authority to the Director of Planning and Development to grant planning permission, subject to the completion of a legal agreement under Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act, based on the heads of terms identified in Appendix 2 and the conditions listed in Appendix 1. Thank you.
So I've just been asked as well, just to reiterate the point that Liam made, drawing members' attention to the two late objections outlined in the officer update report. If people had a chance to read those. So I think my first question, I'm just interested in knowing how close the Lock building will be to the new venue, and whether any projections have been done of the impact of concerts sort of taking place in the cafe. My understanding is that the performance area would be to the back of the cafe, so I would expect spill to be minimised, but I'm just wondering from a scientific point of view, what work's been done to assess the level of noise penetration to the Lock building.
Go. Thanks, Chair. Just to talk a little bit about the design and layout of the proposal. So the building is predominantly a cafe building, community cafe, open
of course, yeah,
to the gardens. So it'd be primarily for food and beverage during the day. The idea is in the evening that it's open to during the week to communities for rehearsals such as choirs and other ensembles. There'll be some weekend concerts, and Mark set out the sort of range that they would include. When we design a music or theatre facility within another building, you design it as a box within a box. So it's floating within the building to make sure that acoustically it's completely sealed. And that would be the case here. So we have a design obligation, if you like, to not let music penetrate outside to neighbours. And I think the Lock building is quite some distance from this, but also to the residents in the building itself.
So it would soundproof.
Be more impacted than the neighbours, I'd suggest. So that is how it'd be designed, and that's how we would take it forward. And there's certain measurements for how you would design that envelope to mitigate noise escaping.
Yes.
I just mentioned that there's also two conditions that are relevant to this. One is condition 30, which has been proposed, which is a sound insulation condition. So there'll be further sound insulation provided, information and data provided, so officers can review that, and that would obviously be available to residents as well. And obviously the new condition 53 on the hours of use obviously provides restrictions on the overall hours of use. So there's not going to be noisy, hopefully non-noisy activities going on beyond basically 11 o'clock on Fridays or Saturdays, and then on Sundays it's 6 o'clock.
You've got some timings for the music performances that are included in our extra part of report that we've got for this evening's meeting. How much later, though, after the performances are finished, would the cafe be open, just in terms of recorded music and the kind of chatter that would be sort of going on? Or is the idea that the venue would be closed by 11:30? Okay. And the other objection that's been raised is sort of fear of crime. I didn't note a response from the police about the planning application. I know they usually are consulted. I'm just wondering, Liam, was there any consultation of the police about any concerns around crime in the area?
Thanks, Councillor. We'd usually consult the Secure by Design team at the police, so they give out information on how to design a scheme to minimise crime or antisocial behaviour. I'm just double checking if we had a condition recommended from them. I'll have to quickly search through. But in general terms, in plain terms, this will be a very well overlooked space. This isn't a pub. It's not. I don't know whether they serve alcohol or not, but this won't be a place where people congregate for long periods of time. It's a nice open space that's overlooked by two large buildings. What we generally look for in planning in terms of avoiding antisocial behaviour is the idea of what we call natural surveillance. So people aren't going to hang out and do antisocial behaviour in an area that's very publicly open. where everyone can see them. So in broad sort of planning terms, we don't have any major concerns that this would contribute towards crime. Probably the opposite at the moment. It's a sort of derelict site with nothing on it. So if anything, it should improve. But yeah, I'll get back to you on the secure by design. I'm just checking if there was a condition. Sorry.
Chair, can I just add to that? I mean, I think that Mr. Fadden is absolutely right that at the moment the site is a derelict site. The canal path is difficult to walk along because it's a derelict site. There's no activity in there. It feels difficult. Even Stratford High Street doesn't have a huge amount of activity. The idea of bringing activity to the ground level, having people both coming out of the residential elements and the cafe, will actually add active surveillance to the area. It'll feel safer.
And I was going to quickly sort of bring Mark Cass in, having cut him off in his prime of description of the jazz side of this venue. Mark, I'm guessing that you've had a lot of experience of the kind of people who would attend such a cafe. I mean, have you seen much instance of crime with those particular individuals?
No, it's jazz typically attracts the slightly more mature audience. I am quite often the youngest member of the audience there, and I'm 63. So it isn't designed as a hang around venue afterwards, like some that you would get in the West End. If there was a demand and if we felt that there was an opportunity that was not to be missed, then a licensing application would be put into place, which I'm sure would introduce additional security. I'm convinced that the venue, once the concert finishes at say 10:30, 10:45, everybody will be long gone and locked up at home in bed by 11:30. So the crime element is, we're talking about a jazz and a folk crowd principally. I think for the types of concerts that we're looking at, I'm not sure that we're going to attract the level of crime that some venues may attract in bigger, more densely populated areas, I think.
And I think it's good that you mentioned licensing, because this the control of such a venue would sort of go beyond the remit of this committee into licensing territory. And were there to be any issues, I know we've got quite a tough licensing team who I imagine would sort of clamp down on that. So with that, I'm going to throw to the committee to see if there are any questions from the.
Yeah, I've got a question. Chair, I've got
Beckles.
a few. It's just I'll throw this question to you, Liam, because it is officer one, and it's about amendments, especially around the 3-bedroom housing that we would normally consider, but because of the affordable split, we're foregoing that. Where there is somewhat of a crossover between the LLDCs, which is no more planning local plan, and our local plan. I imagine that, you know, the LDCs once takes primacy, but was there any scope for us to push for more family-sized homes on this development in the scheme?
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, so strictly speaking, the Newham local plan has no weight in this because it is only the LLDC local plan which applies. They don't have the same policies that we do for the 39% 3-bed units. We did have discussions early in pre-app with the applicant to try and maximise that. For various reasons, viability reasons, they weren't able to get it as high as we would potentially like. But there's not the policy backing to insist upon it, I would say. Having said that, as I mentioned in the report, they did shuffle things around to make sure that those 3 beds which were included, a large proportion were in the affordable social rented part, which is a primary goal. Again, there's no policy requiring them to do that, so it is welcomed.
Thanks for that clarity. My other question is around the build to rent. I guess this build to rent sector, the model that you're using. How long do your tenants averagely stay? Have you got like a median figure or an average figure? Newham, as you know, is a very transient borough, and I think Stratford is becoming even more transient, especially with student accommodation. So just wondering about the tenure you're expecting when they come.
Yeah, and typically we look at, so as part of the management policy, we need to offer 3-year tenancies. But it tends to be in excess of 2 years. Now, these are residents that stay for longer periods, and we're not really intending to be letting these units to graduates or students short term. It's all about long-term residents.
Thanks for that. And in terms of jobs and skills, there is a section on page 170, which just sets out at the percentage of jobs that should go to new residents, or at least people within our borough. Have you engaged with workplace and the other training facility or training departments within our organisation? And will there be any further scope to ensure that these jobs aren't just, I guess, low-level jobs, but actually have much more sustainability in terms of apprenticeship or potentially project manager, assistant project manager, whatever it might be, so that new residents can get a good, I guess, end use out of the scheme?
Yeah, the intention is to ensure that we engage with those. We haven't as yet engaged with those, but we will absolutely do that as part of the stages as we progress through the construction operationally as well.
Another one's around the design. I know that our organisation, Newham, hasn't had, I guess, input through our design review panel, and just from the quality review panel. And I guess this is one for officers. That crossover, are we confident that the design considerations at the LDC as it was is compliant and is up to our standards of what we would expect from a design of a building of this type and size and scale and mass?
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, I will say one thing is the design has changed quite a lot since they went to the QRP, because we had some pre-app engagement prior to it coming to Newham. So the QRP comments I pasted for information in the report, perhaps not the most up to date. In terms of if they're up to the standard, ultimately we have the final say. The QRP no longer exists. This is an unusual case because of the crossover. It didn't feel beneficial to bring it to a separate review panel within Newham. However, we made that judgment based on the fact that the design was high, the quality was good. The view from our design officers was that if there had been something we didn't like, some issue around the height or the design or something like that, we would have then taken it to a separate DRP and sort of started that process again. But in this instance, we felt that the design was up to our standards and we didn't need to do that.
Sure thing. And
is it just to add to that? Is that okay? It's a good question. So just to note that the Newham design officer attended the LLDC design review panel, so he was present at that. The updates that Liam mentioned were in response to the commentary. So the changes that have been made and that you see before you today respond to the LLDC commentary. And we've also ran through those with Newham's design officer. So he's been party to that journey, as it were, throughout.
Okay, and just one final question. It was around the 20,000 that would be that came about from Natural England's critique of the scheme. In terms of our, so who's the money paid to? Is it paid to Natural England, or is it paid to Newham to provide better facilities within our parks, or better green spaces, or improve our green spaces? And how soon could we spend it if this planning permission was to be approved?
I can answer that. Basically, we've agreed with Natural England that the money that we get for SANG's payment it will come to Newham, and then it will go to implement the Beckton Park master plan, because they agree that that's a suitable alternative natural green space. So so that's good. So that will benefit residents of Newham. You know, the money won't go out of the borough. While I'm talking, there's also a couple of questions from Councillor Sally Pontin?
Yes, I was going to bring her in after I'd sort of
Okay.
exhausted my panel in the room.
Okay.
Councillor Councillor Beckles, that was your last question, wasn't it? Councillor Verdi.
Yeah, just to, going back to the community cafe, in the sense, another officer mentioned that they'll be used some weekends. Do we have any idea how many weekends you're looking at? In the sense that if 20 weekends or, because obviously,
If I could ask Mark.
yeah, this is to the officer.
Guidance on that one.
Yeah, thank you for the question, councillor. I think we would look at monitoring how many events over the course of the year, literally as we go on. When you're launching a venue, there would be a relatively intense every weekend kind of scenario, perhaps for the first quarter, the first 6 months. If that proved that it wasn't viable, then we could drop that down to once a month, once every fortnight, that kind of thing. It's an operational concern that affects the business plan, and we build a model around a level of flexibility. We would anticipate that it is so successful that it's busy every week throughout the year. But we with any new startup, we will overestimate to a point, but with a level of due diligence in there that allows us to be flexible enough that if we did have to drop it back a bit, then there will be a sensible approach to making sure that it still remained viable. And if we found, for example, that jazz was more popular than one particular other type of music, we could always increase one and reduce the other, as long as it made sure that the business remained commercially viable.
So, in a sense that at the time there could be other events or other type of music, if the need or the requirement was there from the community, being a community cafe.
Yes. We're calling it a jazz. I'm calling it a jazz hub as a working title, but I'm mindful of the fact that it's an arts and cultural venue. It may well be that we get a huge demand from young people around spoken word, or even to a point where there's dance. You probably wouldn't get me involved with that, but that there is that level of flexibility in the model that if we promote it as an arts and cultural centre, and it will start off with jazz as its hub, then there's a level of flexibility in that allows us to bring in, and bearing in mind with the 220 languages that are spoken in the borough, we need to be mindful of the fact that we could have a different gig every year, every weekend.
Yeah. Can I just ask about the costs a little bit? Obviously, you're saying you're going to be marketing the space at 50% of the market rate. Do you think this is going to be achievable in a sense if the demand is there, that you might have to increase the level of costs you might have and might have to drop the percentage?
We would always be interested in dropping the percentage. We would always be, from a commercial perspective, the lower the rent for us, the better. We would sit down and negotiate with our landlords what that rent would be and over what period of time. And there may even be an opportunity, and this is strictly subject to contract, that there may even be an opportunity for a revenue share that saw money coming back into the building that meant that we could reinvest in improvement of facilities. It is a community interest company that will be operating it. Salaries will be drawn by the staff and the personnel involved with it, but it's there to produce a community asset. So we would make sure that it has to be commercially viable, and we would make sure that any proceeds that were left over after the necessary expenses went back to improve the delivery of the product and the service, and to make sure that it was absolutely open to the community.
Hey, Madeline, I've noted you've put a couple of questions in the chat. Would you like to ask them in person?
Yes, please, Chair, if I may.
Excellent, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Going back to something that Liam pointed out during his presentation about the actual buildings, not just the usage. Liam, you said that the buildings are tall, but you said they're in comparison to others in the area. By others in the area, do you mean on Stratford High Street? Do you mean in the Olympic Park?
Primarily Stratford High Street. So I did see a question in the chat there, councillor. So I would draw your attention to page 230 of your report. There is a kind of indicative drawing which shows the general heights of schemes which exist in the area and have consent. It's not the biggest, I apologise for that, but you can see these schemes in the middle there, just in front of the kind of yellow squarish block, if you like.
Yeah.
So it's certainly not the shortest in the area, but this was not the tallest. And in general, in that context of the high street, which we probably expect to increase in height as the years go by as well, we're fairly comfortable, I'll put it that way.
Okay. And given that there is a number of tall buildings on the high street, is the added density of these buildings still acceptable?
So in terms of density, this isn't really a metric that is used as much anymore. The old London plan used to use density to determine how tall and how dense buildings could be. So in general terms, we don't really look at density. We look at the overall design. Is the design acceptable? And then the over wider public benefits. So the affordable housing provision, the general provision of housing towards the borough's stock and that kind of thing.
Okay. Thank you for that, Liam. Chair, may I go on to question 2?
Yes, go for it.
Thank you. Talking more now to the developers with regards to the historical and archaeological interest within the area, have the full preparations been made for pre-construction works and for actual ensuring that there is suitable supervision of the original groundworks?
Yes, councillor. Obviously, as part of the environmental impact assessment, there was an archaeological assessment submitted with that, and there is also a condition 4, which the officers are suggesting, which is a written scheme of investigation, which means that prior to any demolition or development taking place, we have to provide a written scheme of investigation as to a strategy and to assess any archaeology that would be found on the site during the initial enabling works. So we have, throughout the process, assessed archaeology as an important heritage asset in relation to this site, and it will be protected going forward.
Okay, thank you. I can't see the documents at the moment. Who is your consultants?
Trium were the environmental consultants. They were managing. Apologies, I haven't got the archaeology report in front of me, but Trium were the overarching consultant that were managing the process.
Right, okay.
Is that your last question?
It is. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Something I want to pick up that struck me while Madeline was asking her question about the height of the building, and that is going to page 161. I'm aware that these comments date back to the LLDC's community review panel way back in 2023. But there was a comment made then about the proposals not delivering the public benefits required and the quality of outdoor amenity space being undermined by overshadowing. Liam, I'm guessing this is a question to you. Have these comments been totally ruled out by developments that have taken place since? I'm assuming they have, but I just thought I'd better check because this all sounded quite...
Yeah, to an extent, I say they would. As I mentioned, the scheme that was presented to the QRP was initially very different. It had a car park in the middle, so the kind of outdoor space was pushed to the sides and the rear of the site. So now we have that big central space. It's much more well lit. It's right between the two buildings, so it should get a good amount of daylight. In terms of the public benefits, again, although we're not using the Newham policies, when we do assess tall buildings in Newham, one of the things we look at in terms of public benefits is improvements to the public realm. So if this had been assessed on a Newham scheme, we would be looking at that open space, that community cafe, because it's activating the the river frontage at the rear. All of those are public benefits, which we consider kind of contribute towards allowing the taller aspect of the building to be okay.
Chair, would it be worth just adding, I can't honestly remember the heights of the building at the time, but certainly the shape was slightly different. So following that review and the design review panel, there was a lot more environmental modelling and
That's been addressed.
views. So the building's been quite carefully shaped in order to sit in its surroundings. The height of the buildings was agreed with the LLDC in relation to a series of wayfinders going east-west from Pudding Mill through to Sugar House. So the tall buildings in the emerging master plans will highlight Pudding Mill Station. This building will highlight the crossing point of Stratford High Street because there isn't another one for over 100 metres to the west. And then it's also in keeping with the height of the emerging taller buildings at Sugar House. The lower of the two buildings, that height was to be in keeping with the rest of the Sugar House, the Pudding Mill master plan as that was coming forward in their parameter plans. And so both the height and the shape of the buildings is carefully reviewed with LLDC through environmental modelling and townscape analysis.
Okay, if the committee will indulge me, I've got one more question to Mark Cass. And I'm guessing you're going to be slightly biased in this, but why Jazz and Newham? What evidence have you had that Newham desires a jazz venue over all the other different types of music that come through such a diverse community?
Jazz forms the basis of most popular music that has been produced since the 20s, the 30s. If you look at the origins of where jazz came from, it's probably one of the most, excuse me, historically inclusive musics. It's quite diverse. It attracts male and females to listen, to watch and participate in it. Newham is one of the youngest boroughs in London, so the attraction of jazz and the modern version of jazz, and jazz is such a broad church, it goes from anything from what I call doobie-doobie-doo music right the way through to the really noisy stuff that some people claim gives them a migraine, that kind of stuff. So that the full improvisation range right the way through from that. So I think it actually allows everybody to get involved with it. The concerts that I've put on with Newham Music have proven through the audiences that we get a very, very diverse age range, cultural range, and a huge interest from the young people that are coming through now from the music conservatoires, or whatever you want to call them, the music schools at Guildhall in East London, Trinity south of the river, and even over at the Royal Academy, are really, really becoming quite attracted to the arts and cultural aspects of the wider cultural focus of jazz, in particular across of the arts across the Olympic Park. So we know from practical experience there is an interest in it. There's an educational attachment to it as well, which will be, if you look at something, for example, Black History Month, jazz is American classical music. So if you look at the heritage of the jazz again from an educational perspective, there is demand from there, and there will be a fascination to engage young people. And anecdotally, the conversations we have with young people is this.
Looks like one of Sammy's parties. Looks like one of Sammy's parties.
Sorry, Councillor Sarli Ponting, can you mute, please?
Oh, sorry.
I got excited.
Sorry.
Party there. Sorry. Not every day you come to a planning thing and get invited to a party. So I think anecdotally that, and if you look at just recently, there's one particular band that's come out, very young.
Ezra Collective.
The Ezra Collective.
Yeah.
They were the first jazz band to sell out Wembley Arena. They were
And win a Mercury.
And first jazz band to win a Brit Award. They're from they all claim that they're from Enfield. They're not all from Enfield. Some are actually from these here parts as well. So it's a big thing in London, and there's a huge crossover of jazz from the other side of the river. And as I said, the Arts Council have identified it as a priority area, and music and the arts and the culture of jazz that comes with it is really important. And from our experience out in Essex, just at the Jazz Archive, we get a lot of young people coming in to see the museum because they understand that jazz is the basis of so much music, even some of that drill music and heavy duty rap and hip hop stuff. If you listen to the background of that, the fundamentals of it, there's jazz music that it's based around. So there is demand for it. I think there's not just the demand for jazz, but there is also the spillover into the folk music side of things, the ethnic music side of things as well, the world music, however you want to describe it. And as I said before to the councillor, there's 220 languages spoken in there, in this borough, and the opportunity to create improvised music, because pretty much that's what jazz is going to be very, very attractive to many, many people.
Okay, I have no idea why anyone would want to pretend to come from Enfield rather than Newham, but anyway, moving on. Are there any further questions from the Councillor Beckles?
There's just a question around at the back of the site, there is the waterfront and your plans to, I guess, reactivate it. Would that include street lighting or any sort of mentioned park wayfinders? Would that be part of that, just to make it safer and I'm sure secure by design and everything else?
The design is trying to do a few things. It's making that riverside much wider. It's overlooking it and it's connecting it through to Stratford High Street, which doesn't have a connection in that area at the moment, other than obviously going up onto the bridge. So lighting, play, seating will all be part of the detailed design, and there's a condition already in to secure the monitoring of that before it's implemented. Yeah.
And it's also one of the things we talked to the Canal and River Trust about was the lighting, and there's actually, again, going back to conditions, but there's a very important condition about the management of the what's called the aquatic area, but it's the 8 metres from the Bowback River into our site, which actually is all about managing that space, the lighting, the landscaping, all of those aspects.
Okay, if I've got no further questions from the committee, I think it's time to move to the decision. So Liam, can you share the decision with us, please?
Yes. Okay, that should be coming through.
Yeah, it's slowly coming through. Excellent. So the Strategic Development Committee is asked to note the contents of the updated report and resolve to agree the reasons for approval as set out in this report. In the event that no new material considerations are raised by the Canals and Rivers Trust, refer this application to the Mayor of London, brackets the GLA, as a stage 2 referral. If new material considerations are raised, officers shall bring the application back to Strategic Development Committee. And 3, subject to the Mayor of London or delegated authorised officer advising that he's content to allow the council to determine the application itself, delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Development to grant planning permission subject to the completion of a legal agreement under Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 as amended, based on the heads of terms identified at Appendix 2 of this report and the conditions listed in Appendix 1 of the report. Are we happy to agree this? Agreed.
Agreed.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for attending and for everybody else who's attended committee tonight for this item. So you're absolutely welcome to stay, but equally welcome to leave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, We move on to item 9, London City Airport, Hartman Road, Silvertown. Yes, now my understanding is that nobody is actually attending for this item. So when our guests have left, if officers want to talk the committee through the item, and then we might have questions. But if not, we might want to go straight to the recommendation, but everyone's left, I'll hand over.
Thank you, Chair. Just let me know when that's showing for you.
Okay, we've just got a couple of people still to leave.
No problem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Officers, we're now clear. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This is item 9, London City Airport. So I'm sure you're well aware of where the airport is. So an application came to you in July last year for an outline application related to a hotel on the airport site. And that was given approval, as I say, in July last year. And here are some of the plans just to show you the outline permission. So as part of that proposal, there was a head of turn in the 106 obligations, a standard term I'm sure you're familiar with to provide a financial contribution towards jobs, towards the our new and work recruitment process that we use, the program. So that amount that in this instance was £914,000. That's calculated based on the number of jobs created as part of the development. When we don't have access to that information, we calculate it based on an estimated build cost. So our colleagues in the employment and skills team have a database that they use, and that calculates how much they should apply. So the applicants, we're currently going through signing the 106 of that application at the moment. During that process, the applicants queried the calculation of that amount, and they consider that based on the 100 jobs created, it should have been lower. It should have been 316,000. So, excuse me, that revised figure was reviewed by the skills and employment team, and they do agree that amount is correct. There was information in the planning application at the time. Unfortunately, it was overlooked both by ourselves and the applicant, and so the amount was agreed when it went to committee. So because it went to committee with that higher amount, procedurally, we need to bring it back to you, which is what we're doing today, to change that amount. But we have to do a very short assessment. Very simply, would our recommendation have changed if the lower amount was presented to you back in July? So firstly, the employment skills team have confirmed that the lower amount is the correct calculation that should have been applied. And secondly, this contribution is required by local plan. It's intended to be proportionate. It's a form of mitigation. It's not in itself a reason to approve permission. So in a nutshell, if this lower amount had been provided, we wouldn't have changed our recommendation. The scheme still would have been acceptable, and so our recommendation would have still been to approve. So on that basis, we just ask the committee to agree to amend the wording to reflect the new amount. And that is it on that one. Thank you.
Fantastic. So have members got any questions?
There's just one from me. It's just about how it was overlooked. I'm just trying to understand where the mistake happened. Was it at our end or was it at the applicant's end in terms of putting forward the numbers?
Thanks, Kaz. It's a bit of both, actually. So it's not unusual for us to go through these obligations before we get to committee and kind of iron out anything that we think is incorrect or anything like that. Normally, when it gets to committee, you can kind of read those obligations as agreed by both sides. In this case, the number of 100 jobs was in a document that was overlooked by our team. And unfortunately, the applicant didn't pick it up either, so they agreed to that higher amount initially. It was only when they went to finally sign the agreement that they saw it and realized there was an error. So it's a little bit of both, I would say. Which sounds like a cop-out, but I promise it isn't.
Sure thing. And just in terms of cost of reviewing it, is not overly onerous on us, is it? Or
no, it's very simple.
Okay.
This is purely a procedural issue. If we had the authority to edit it ourselves, we would, but this needs to go before you can.
Thank you.
So Has anyone else got anything they want to ask, or is everybody happy just to approve the correction?
Yeah, with the correction.
Just a comment, did you say it was good that it was picked up?
Yeah.
Okay. So is there a formal decision statement that I have to read out at this stage, or do we just say that we approve?
I will put the
Excellent, thank you.
recommendation up. I don't know that it's a bit unusual. I don't know if there is a formal, maybe Vincent can chip in, but I believe you just have to confirm agreement to the amendment.
Okay, so members are therefore recommended to agree an amendment to the wording of the head of terms from local labour via workplace, commitment to providing 35% construction phase and 50% end user jobs through a contribution of £914,107 plus RPI payable prior to implementation. Local labour via workplace, including apprenticeships. Point local supply chains commitment to promote the use of supply chain opportunities. 2, local labour via workplace commitment to providing 35% construction phase and 50% end user jobs through a contribution of £316,300 and RPI payable prior to implementation. And the rest is as was above. So is everyone happy to agree that?
Yep, agreed.
Fantastic. So that concludes tonight's business of the committee. And just to announce that the date of our next meeting will be the 20th of May, 2025, not 1st of April, as outlined in the agenda. So I look forward to seeing everybody in May. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you, everybody.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you. And with that, I'm closing the meeting at 2020.